We all think we have a pretty good handle on what nothing is, right? It's empty space, total silence, just the absence of, well, everything. Seems like a simple common sense idea. But it turns out modern physics has a huge problem with it, a really big problem, because when we look at the universe with our absolute best tools in the most precise experiments we've ever dreamed up, real absolute nothingness just never shows up. So let's get into this.
The brilliant physicist Richard Feynman left us with that warning, and honestly, it is the perfect frame for what we're talking about today, because the belief in nothing might just be one of the greatest acts of self-deception in human history. We're going to unpack exactly why by following two totally different paths, one from science and the other from philosophy, and you'll see how they land at the exact same, really startling conclusion. All right, first up, let's let science have a crack at it. We're going to challenge the very idea that space can ever be truly empty.
For the longest time, our picture of the universe was pretty simple. You have these tiny, separate little particles just kind of floating around in a big, boring, empty box. But modern physics, specifically quantum field theory, comes along and just throws that entire picture out the window. The universe isn't made of things at all. It's made of fields. Think of them like these interlocking, vibrant oceans of potential that fill every single inch of space. And this changes everything. See, an electron isn't a tiny little marble. It's a ripple, a localized vibration in the electron field. A photon of light? Not a little bullet. It's an excitation in the electromagnetic field. The particles we see and measure are just the tips of the iceberg. The real action, the fundamental reality, is in the fields themselves. So, what's a vacuum then? If you could magically suck out all the particles, all those ripples, what would be left? Well, it's not nothing. What's left is the ground state, the lowest possible energy level of all those fields. The best analogy is a perfectly calm ocean. The waves are gone, sure, but the ocean itself is obviously still there. It's quiet, but it is never, ever gone.
Okay, that might sound like a pretty neat theory, but how do we know it's real? Well, let's look at the hard, measurable proof that this emptiness is actually very, very real. So this is the setup for one of the most profound experiments in all of physics. What do you think would happen if you took two perfectly neutral metal plates, put them unbelievably close together inside a vacuum, and took absolutely everything out from between them? Now, according to the old view, the answer should be, well, nothing. Absolutely nothing. The conditions have to be absolutely perfect. The plates are totally uncharged, there are no stray particles, no radiation, and they are just nanometers apart. We're talking billionths of a meter. We've basically created the best version of nothing that we are physically capable of making. And what happens is just wild. The plates are pushed together, the vacuum itself, that so-called nothing between them, exerts a real, physical, measurable force. This is called the Casimir Effect. It is direct, experimental proof that the quantum vacuum is not empty. It has energy, and that energy can do actual physical work. And believe me, this isn't just some weird effect that only happens in a lab. It has consequences for literally everything we experience. I mean, think about your own hand. The atoms that make up your hand are over 99.99999% empty space. So, what stops your hand from just passing right through a table? What you feel is solid isn't substance touching substance. It's the electron field in your hand repelling the electron field in the table. You have never, ever actually touched anything in your entire life. The feeling of solidity is an illusion created by force fields interacting in that supposedly empty space. And that idea? Well, that's the perfect bridge to our second path of inquiry. Thousands of years before quantum mechanics was even a glimmer of an idea, a completely different discipline was investigating the nature of reality. And it arrived at a strikingly similar conclusion about what emptiness really is. In the philosophy of Advaita Vedanta, reality doesn't start with a bunch of separate objects. It starts with a foundational existence they call Brahman. Now, this isn't a religious concept, like a creator god. It's an ontological one. It's about the fundamental nature of being itself. Brahman isn't a thing in space. It's the very substratum, the very fabric in which space and all things appear and then eventually disappear. And that leads to their concept of the void, or Shunya. In the West, we tend to think of zero as, well, a lack of value, right? But in Indian thought, Shunya never meant absence. It meant pure potential. It's like a silence that contains all possible sounds. It's the zero from which all other numbers can arise. It's a nothing that is actually the source of everything. This tradition also has a concept called Maya, Now, Maya doesn't mean the world is a fantasy or some kind of hallucination. It means reality as we experience it through our very limited senses. And modern science absolutely agrees with this. Your senses didn't evolve to show you the fundamental truth of reality. They evolved for survival, creating a simplified user interface of solid objects and colors and sounds so you don't walk into a wall. Okay, so we've got these two completely independent lines of inquiry. One uses particle accelerators and math. The other uses deep introspection. And they seem to be pointing in the exact same direction.
Now, we have to be really clear and intellectually honest here. This is not about saying, hey, look, physics proves this ancient philosophy was right all along. That's way too simple. It's something much deeper and, frankly, much more interesting than that. It's about two completely separate methods of inquiry, working independently, both discovering that our intuitive, common-sense idea of absolute emptiness is an illusion.
I mean, just look at the structural parallels here. It's pretty amazing. In physics, space is a collection of active fields. In Vedanta, it's the substratum of Brahman. In physics, what we call emptiness is actually the energetic ground state. In Vedanta, it's Shunya, full of potential. In physics, the idea of separate solid objects is a contextual illusion. In Vedanta, it's Maya, a conceptual veiling of a deeper unity. So the ultimate takeaway is this massive shift in how we see the universe. Reality is not a collection of separate things just floating around in a dead, empty void. Reality is a single, continuous, and vibrant fabric. And what we perceive as things are just temporary patterns, ripples, within that one fabric.
And that leaves us with one final provocative thought. If the space between you and me isn't really empty, and if we ourselves are not truly solid, isolated objects, but are more like patterns in one continuous reality, then what does that fundamentally make us?